In this episode, we're going to be covering the vicissitudes of the Halloween and Hellraiser franchises because we need to talk a little bit about them in their larger context to understand why the crossover between Halloween and Hellraiser didn't happen. And to do that, we need to talk a little bit about Freddy and Jason. I'll do that real quick, and then we'll get to Hellraiser and Halloween and how they are all interweaved. If you saw the ending of Jason Goes to Hell, as well as Freddy's Dead, right? Jason is in hell, and presumably Freddy's in hell. So they had been planning and building up Freddy versus Jason for quite a while. It just took a long time for the scripts and, the cast and everything to come together. But with Hellraiser and Halloween, there really wasn't much of a setup in either franchise. But several scripts did get made, and it seemed like it was going to happen, but the production companies got nervous that it was going to be successful. So, of course, Jason and Freddy comes out, does really, really well financially. I'm not a big fan of it, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. But financially, it does show that there is something to be said about these crossover of these horror characters. But we have to realize that Michael and Halloween and Hellraiser have always sort of been in two different universes, although they encountered the same kind of issues. Now, Halloween is a little bit older than Hellraiser, right? It goes back to the 1970s. If you look at the beginning of almost every Halloween film, you're going to see the words Mustafa Akkad. Mustafa essentially put up the money for the first Halloween. He didn't control the whole thing. I mean, John Carpenter and some other people had some of the rights to Halloween, but they sold off the rights. So essentially, Mustafa was put in charge. And the franchise has been a little bit all over the place. But beginning in the 1990s, they wanted to go into a much younger direction. I guess that's what you want to call it. So they wanted to make it a more MTV-friendly kind of Michael. So if you've seen some of the 1990s films, they are really, really different from the 1980s films. The cutting is faster. They have this kind of thumping soundtrack, right? They're changing the classical score. They just tried to make it more market-friendly with mixed results. And of course, H2O also comes out and it makes a little bit of money. So Michael's not doing great, but this attempt to make it more mainstream is at least doing okay. Hellraiser is a whole other story. It has two pretty good films. Again, not huge financial success, but they make a little bit of money. And again, the same thing happens. The 1990s come and they want to make it much, much more market-friendly, more mainstream. It looks very, very different. So you look at something like Hellraiser 3, it is a very MTV-style film. I don't mind Hellraiser 3, I think it's fine, but this is the beginning of them really moving away from the first two films and the core mythology. And then part 4 comes out, and it is a very, very mixed bag. There are just tons and tons of behind-the-scenes issues with the director and the producers. There's just a lot of issues in terms of what they want to do, what they want the script to do, how do they want to market it. So just a lot of drama happens behind the scenes. I'll do a whole thing on that, but it's very, very big and complicated. The film comes out, and of course, it doesn't do what they expect it to do. So Hellraiser is not in decline, but it's in a state of crisis. And I think Hellraiser 4, in retrospect, is not great, but it sort of shows a lot of potential. But they just decide to abandon the theatrical release period. From then on, Hellraiser comes out on video on demand, and film after film has really nothing to do with Hellraiser. In fact, they literally get scripts that they were going to use for other films, just insert Hellraiser. They even did one thing where they filmed 2 Hellraisers back to back just to get some tax breaks in Europe. So it's being looked at primarily as this kind of financial instrument, but it's declining. So after film, it keeps getting worse and worse. Even Doug stops doing the main character because he's not being paid anymore and the scripts are declining. So it's just in a tailspin. Meanwhile, Halloween is doing comparatively a little bit better. I mean, again, whatever you think of H2O and Halloween Resurrection or the Rob Zombie films, they do show there's still an audience for Michael. Maybe not a huge audience, but they do show consistent interest in Michael Myers as a character. And of course, finally, it gets taken over by Jason, and more recently, it just has this massive success recently. Now, I'm not a big fan of the way they rebooted Halloween. I think it has a lot of issues. at least as a film and as a story. But as a production issue, there's very little drama. They make it for comparatively little money, only 10 million, and it makes a huge, huge profit. Now we're going to get back to Hellraiser. So what are the chances of a Hellraiser Halloween crossover now? Well, we have to be honest, they're really probably very, very slim. Now, Mustafa's dead, and basically his sons take over, the Akkad brothers. Now, Mustafa was offered the Hellraiser Halloween crossover, and Doug has given kind of differing accounts as to what happened or why he said no, but he says no. But he's dead, so the Akkad brothers, his sons, have taken over. But you got to see it from their perspective. They're seeing, Halloween is growing. It's had a massive success. The character has always maintained kind of some interest in the public eye. But in sharp contrast, Hellraiser overall has declined in quality. It's no longer very profitable. And it's not clear if the fan base is still there for it. I mean, the fans are not paying for the latest films, and with good reason. The quality is just so poor for these latest films. It's like nobody wants to see them. None of the critics like them. Why would we possibly want a crossover with this property that's declining? So from a financial perspective, I can see why they would probably still say no. Now, good news and bad news. It may turn out that Hellraiser will revert back to Clive Barker, because they put out these films just to retain the legal rights, and those are expiring. But I have to say, I'm very, very skeptical that even if Clive gets the rights back, anything's going to really change. Because unless he's going to put up the money himself to do the film all by himself, and I think that's very, very unlikely, or he could attract financial capital, which I think is also very unlikely, he's going to just be selling the thing back to a production company, and we're going to be right back where we're starting, where Hellraiser has always been a very difficult franchise because it is very filled with graphic material. It's got a lot of kinky eroticism. It's for a very particular audience. And I myself am not a hardcore Hellraiser fan, but I do recognize and respect the core mythology, and it's just not for a mainstream audience. I can foresee it making $50 to $100 to even $200 million, but it is not a billion-dollar property. And trying to make it one is going to keep ending up in defeat. So I'm pretty pessimistic. So ironically, as things keep getting better for Michael, it's going to get more and more unlikely that there's going to be any Hellraiser or Halloween crossover. But again, pundits have always been wrong. I could be wrong. And maybe something will happen. Maybe Jason will see the financial worth of doing something with the Hellraiser property. But at this point, Hellraiser is in a very, very bad place. So hopefully what's going to happen is a few films are going to rehabilitate Hellraiser. It's going to show that it's critically and financially successful. And then maybe something will happen with Halloween. But I have to be honest, I think that's very, very unlikely. Alright, so this has been a survey of the possibilities of a Hellraiser Halloween crossover back then and now. Partially examined Kubrick. If you like the content, please hit the like button and or subscribe. Thank you for listening. Please be safe. Please hit a like and or comment. Thanks.